Hi, we're here live to talk about sourdough. I'm going to wait for a few minutes just to see who is watching. And if you are watching, please say hi in the comments, or even better, say hi and where you're from, because I'd love to know who's watching. That would be great. Um, and now I'm just kind of waiting to see if people are coming on here. Please say hi in the comments if you're on. That would be so helpful. Oh, see that. Oh, yay. Hi.
Yummy.
Yeah, from Snohomish. Hi, Yummy. So, uh, oh, good. Hi.
Robert.
Yay, Robert. Hi, how are you? Here comes people from all over Bainbridge Island and Seattle. Good to see you. Hi.
MJ, Charlotte.
MJ. Hi, Charlotte. Yay. We're here. Your head's in the video. And I've got Dottie right here. This is Dottie. And I keep 3 sourdough starters, actually. One is Dottie. She's the mother. I've had her for about 10 years. And I also have one named Mason with me today I'm going to show you. And I have one named Fizz, who's been with me for quite a while, too. So, my name is Cynthia Lair, and I've written some cookbooks. This is my first cookbook, Feeding the Whole Family, and it's in its 4th edition. And I've also written Feeding the Young Athlete. And of course, my most recent one is Sourdough on the Rise, because I'm kind of obsessed about sourdough. And I'll be mostly talking about stuff from this book today. I've also been on the faculty at Bastyr University since 1994. And I'm not full-time anymore. I help start and create and manage their culinary arts program, but now I'm adjunct. And mostly I just teach 1 credit on bread making. So, yay! Here's the loaf that I made yesterday, and I'm just kind of showing this to you too to see that if you kind of do some of the stuff I talk about in the book, you're going to get a really nice rise out of sourdough that is almost entirely whole grains, which is not so easy to do. Yeah. So I'm going to put this down. So the things that I'm going to do in this little class, I'm going to cover 3 things. The first is how to make your own starter. And then the second thing is how to take care of it and some of the problems that people have with that. And then the third thing is, and this is kind of new for me, is how to prime your starter so it's as virile as possible for baking. And those are the 3 things I'm going to do. And please say hi if you're here. Hi, Gay. Oh, look, Hillary. Hi, Hillary. And Jessica, yay. Angela, so nice. And Cynthia, you're here too. Great. And my husband Michael's here. You might see his head bobbing in once in a while. He's monitoring questions. So as we go along, if you have any questions, just post them in the chat. We're going to see them. We're going to note them, and I will answer them. Oh, hi, Jennifer. More people. Yay. And where are you from? Yeah, so put in not only your name and a hello, which I love, but also hi, April, but where you're from as well. That would be great. So, yeah, and ask questions, and I'll answer them. Oh, good morning to Dottie. That's so sweet. Here she is. We love Dottie. So let's get started about making your sourdough starter. And this is so easy. It's going to go kind of fast, so you'll have to kind of It'll go fast. That's all I have to say about it. So I'm going to use this morning even though Dottie's in this Fido jar that's got a rubber gasket, and I'll talk about that later. To make my starter, I'm going to use a wide mouth 1 pint jar, and this just works really well. The wide mouth is easy for getting flour and water in, and 1 pint is a good size. Most people don't need a whole lot of starter unless you're baking every day or doing crazy experiments like me, and I keep 3 starters, and you don't need to do that. So this is a great jar, and in my jar I have about a half a cup of flour. You could have a little less if you wanted, but you don't really need more than that. And in this one I have rye flour and unbleached white flour. You can use any flour, whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour. All flours work. Hi, Grace. All the flours work. Oh, good. Hi, Jan. My friend Jan from high school. Hi. And she's from Michigan. So here's my jar, and here's my about a half a cup of flour. And I'm starting a starter. Too many words of start, but starting a starter. And to this, I'm going to add some lukewarm water. And what I'm looking for is not the amount of water, but the viscosity of my mixture. So because the viscosity is important, I'm going to just do a little bit at a time so that I don't get it too thin and then have to add more flour, because then I'm just making a lot of volume that I don't need. And about a month or so ago, I learned about stirring starters with chopsticks, and now I'm addicted to that, and I have all kinds of pairs of chopsticks, so that's good. So this is pretty good. And in the book, it says of equal parts of flour and water, and I'm going to be talking more about that as we go on. But basically, the mixture is going to be like a thick milkshake or pancake batter. Now, I did this experiment recently where I'm feeding Dottie only white flour, and I'm feeding Fizz only whole wheat flour, and I'm feeding somebody named Mason, who's rather new, only rye flour, and the viscosity is different with different flours. The rye flour makes for the thickest of all, and if I was in a class with you, I'd say, who can tell me why? Can anybody tell me why? Kentucky, hi, that's so great. And Bothell, our friends up in Bothell, Whitby Island, this is so wonderful. Hi, Leah. So this is good. This is about the rye viscosity, so I'm going to come around here and show you. But rye flour tends to make things really viscous because of the fiber. And when that fiber hits water, it's really viscous. Okay, so that's it. Flour and water and kind of a thick but almost pourable mixture. Okay, you go there. That's it. That wasn't very hard. And to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a grape in there. And people get really freaked out and mixed up and messed up about grapes. And if you don't have a grape, please don't worry about it. It's only kind of a bonus thing. It's not a necessary thing. So your sourdough starter mixture is flour and water. And what you're hoping to happen in there is to bloom microorganisms or bacteria that are naturally found on the grain, and attract wild yeast from the air. And as soon as your flour hits water, it wakes up those microorganisms. So you're set on that, and they have food there from the flour. But the wild yeast have to come from your home. Now, if you live in a bakery, I don't, that wild yeast is going to be very abundant. And like my daughter started one recently, and her starter came alive in just a couple of days. I think they have a lot of good wild yeast in their home for some reason. But the thing you can do to attract more wild yeast, and I'm going to come around here, is throw a grape in. And the reason is that there's this kind of white blush on grapes, and a purple one's okay, and a green one's okay too. They all have it, kind of just a little bit of white stuff on it, just a little bit. And most people want to wash that off. But in this case, that white stuff, or it's also called bloom, is wild yeast. And so its friends in the air of your home are going to find their way into your container because there's already some wild yeast there. Kind of cool. Okay, that's it. And now I want to cover it, but not seal it. So there's several ways to do that. I'm going to show you 3. So you want to allow air in and air out, but not much else. So one way, the first way I learned, is to put a piece of cheesecloth on top and the band of your jar. Okay. Wow, it'll go. And you can just screw that on there, and that's good. The second way I learned is just put the lid on, like that, kind of loose. No big deal. And recently I've been using these little food container covers. These little, I call them shower caps, and they work great too. So they're not so tight. It's not like saran wrap or something where nothing's getting in. Okay? Okay, so I'm just going to leave that one on there for now. Now, this is ready to attract wild yeast and wake up the microorganisms and begin to form this dynamic duo, actually. And how it can do that best is if you keep it warm. Maybe it's summer where you are, and actually last week it was kind of summer here, and just the sunlight would have worked pretty well for that, a really sunny window. But what you're looking for is something like about 78 to 80 degrees. So that's warmer than your home would normally be. So you're going to have to find a way to keep it warm if you want it to start turning into a bubbling starter. I have a whole list of things in my book of places to keep things warm. And like this works, like one of these with maybe a hot water bottle or a jar of hot water in there. It'll keep it warm in there. I have a cupboard near the refrigerator that stays about 5 degrees warmer than the rest of the house. That works. My friend Gay, she's on there. Hi, Gay. Put her little starter Stella under a light. That works. And pay attention to what's underneath it as well. So even if I have it warm, and if it's on like a granite countertop or stainless steel, that means there's cold underneath, and it's not going to do as well. So you want it warm. That's it. That's how to make your starter. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm just going to buy one on the internet. Hi, Alexandra. She has a question. I'm just going to buy one on the internet, or I'm going to borrow one from a friend, or I'm going to have my friend make me one. The buying thing I don't really get. From a friend, I get that one because there's some love transfer there. But there's a real advantage to making it yourself because you start to develop a relationship with the starter. And by relationship, I don't mean like it's your best friend or anything, but you begin to understand how it works in your house, what kind of flour is working for you, how much water works, all of those things. And so if making your own is really educational. Also, you'll want to name your starters. Like mine are all named, and when I teach classes, I have everybody name their starter. And this is important. And I actually recommend that you choose the name of someone or something that has some meaning for you. So Dottie was my mother's best friend, and my favorite aunt in the world was Aunt Phyllis, and we called her Fizz, and that's why my second one is called that. Okay. So, yeah, 2 questions.
Well, Angela wants to know, Does rye flour have more protein?
Yes, rye flour does have more protein. Not that much more, but a little bit more. There's actually a chart, I think, in my book of the protein amounts of different flours. Rye has a lot of minerals too, and it also has something called pentosands, which compete with gluten for water. And that's why when you buy 100% rye bread, it has no rye at all to it, because it has said, no, 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 we get everything that's needed for the gluten. We're taking that away.
Jessica wants to know where to find rye flour in Seattle. Besides Amazon, someone else.
Yeah,
mentioned.
rye flour. Well, before the pandemic, it was at the grocery store. I have been driving up to, well, I did it only once so far. I drove up to Fairhaven Mills, which is a local organic mill, and bought a 25-pound bag of rye flour. So, Jessica, I know you live near enough to me that I could bring you some rye flour. It was kind of a nice drive. It's up near Mount Vernon, so about an hour drive.
And Karen wants to know Tracy wants to know how the wild yeast gets in when you have the metal lid or the shower cap cover.
Well, it's loose enough that somebody can get in there. I think that's why the cheesecloth was kind of the original idea, because it could allow stuff in, but it also can allow a little bit too much air and dry the surface. But those shower caps would be my second choice, but I've had no problem using just the lid because it's loose enough that things can still get in there. Yeast is microscopic, so that's really important. Oh yeah, okay. So after you you have a baby starter that I just made, and you're going to keep it warm. And how long does it take before it sort of comes to life? And this is variable. On the internet, you're going to see people that say it takes 3 days. And I've had other people on the internet say it takes at least a month. And you'll find in my book that I'm always kind of going Goldilocks. I'm kind of not going for extremes and trying to find the middle ground. So I have outlined a 14-day feeding schedule. Yours may not take that long because you've kept it warm or because you have a lot of wild yeast in your house. I don't exactly know how long it's going to take before yours comes to life, but what you're going to do is start out slowly, feeding it a little bit every day or every other day. You don't want to overfeed it to begin with because there's not enough beings in there to eat a lot of food. What you're trying to do is take who's in there and feed them enough that they replicate, they reproduce, and make more. So you don't want to overfeed them because it will get kind of still and not be doing anything. Okay, so I have people feed it about a tablespoon of flour and water every day or two, and then once it gets built up, I mean, once your starter is like getting up to the halfway point of your jar, then you need to start throwing out half of it, discarding half of it almost every day, because you just don't want to build it up that big, and it actually gets more virile if you throw some out and then refeed it and give it time. Yeah. Some normal things that happen, I have a list. Some normal things that happen to starters, because, you know, this is kind of funny. Yes, Hannah, you can revive your starter. My friend Matt calls me sourdough Lazarus or something, because I believe in that most starters can be brought back to life. Some normal things that starters do is, number one is develop what we call hooch. So hooch is that layer of liquid that forms on the top, and you'll especially see this if you store your refrigerator, your starter in the refrigerator between bakes. And what that literally is the elimination of the bacteria. Yeah? Okay, that's why it's just liquid. It's also an indication that your starter is hungry, because it's not eating anymore. It's eating just about everything, and it's only eliminating. So the thing to do if you have a lot of hooch in there, one is I typically tend to stir mine back in because it makes the starter more tart, and I like a really sour sourdough. But you'll stir your starter really well. If it's built up too big, pour out half of it and then feed it. Keep it warm water, give it a lot of love, and it will come back. Sometimes it will take a day or two if it's been in the refrigerator a really long time. So you just have to be patient. Another thing is sometimes starters form kind of a white film on top, and that's normal. I've had side-by-side starters fed the same thing, kept in the same place, and one of them had kind of a white film and the other one didn't. So it's hard to, I can't actually explain why it does that, but it's usually lack of attention. And you just need to stir it, discard half of it, feed it. Yeah, it loves that. Sometimes you get some crust on your starter, especially around the top. Now, Dottie doesn't have a lot of crust right now, but this is normal. It can even get thicker and grayer, and that's perfectly fine. If it starts bugging you, just take a paring knife and kind of shave it off and discard it. And if it starts really building up a lot, then you can put your starter in a bowl, clean your jar out, put it back in, feed it, and it'll be fine. How long, from Emily, how long should you wait between feeding and baking? I'm going to get to that, so hang on. So those are the things that mostly happen. If there's anything else, one thing though, a lot of people send me photographs of their starter and ask me what's wrong. And it's very, very difficult to tell from a photograph, because if I was going to, diagnose a starter, I'm going to smell it and I'm going to taste it. Those are the first two things I'm going to do. As long as the taste is not putrid, you're probably okay. And same goes for the smell. And then looks wise, the hooch is okay. It just needs to be stirred in, and the starter discarded half of it, and there you go. What other questions have I missed?
Well, Terry wants to know if she has to keep her starter away from apple cider vinegars and kombucha.
I've heard stories about that, but I've never experienced it. I've never put my starter next to a kombucha. I guess you might want to keep your fermented things somewhat distanced, but I definitely have kraut in my refrigerator and my starters sometimes in another place. Yeah.
And just to know, if you put your starter in a lunch case, do you have to keep replacing the hot water bottle or something like that, or will it be okay by itself without replacing the heat?
Yeah, well, just put your hand in there just like you would check your child's forehead, and is it still kind of warm in there? If it is, great, and if it's not warm in there, then refresh your heat source, right? Anything else?
Nope.
Great. So let's talk for a minute about getting ready for baking, because I saw that coming up. Yeah. So I'm going to show you something kind of cool that I just learned about that's not in the book yet, which is always a nightmare for writers, but that's the way it goes. And to get your starter really primed up for baking, it should be able to double in 8 to 12 hours. So I'm going to show you this one. This is Mason, and he's called that because he's in a mason jar. And I want you to look for a second at what's going on with him. So this line is where he was last night. That was the top layer of this starter. And then by this morning, and you can see all the bubbles in there, especially here, he had definitely doubled in size. And Dottie was the same. She was, it's harder to see in these big jars. It's less impressive, but she was down here and now she's up here. So what that means, if it's doubling like that, is that it has a lot of strength, it has a lot of rising ability, and those bubbles are CO2. So this is sort of like the test run for bread. Does it have enough going on in the starter alone to rise? And if it does, then your bread, can you hear me? This one, yeah, is going to get big like this in the oven. Yeah. How are we doing? Let's see.
Krista's.
Can you just discard instead of throwing it away? What's the difference between discard and throw away, Hillary? Here's the thing though, if it really bugs you to throw out some starter, and we're talking about not even pennies, so it's not a money thing, it's a something else thing. If it really bugs you to throw out part of your starter, then take the part that you need to discard and put it in a jar, and do that whenever you need to, and pretty soon you're going to have enough stuff to make pancake batter. I mean, yeah, pancakes. So that's what I normally do, is take the discard off, save it in a jar in the refrigerator, and then make pancakes. There's also a whole video, I don't have it here, on how to make like little sourdough starter savory pancakes, like with scallions and herbs, and that's the way to use your discard, right? Yeah, use it, right, Hillary? Use it. Okay, so how do you get your starter to do this? Well, you have to really, I'm going to get some things out here that I need. But the main thing that I want to say is that you have to think like a baker. So let's think like a baker for a minute. And a baker is in an environment where the heat is always around the same temperature. That's a big advantage. So people that write sourdough books that are bakers, they sometimes don't talk about or make or give us what we need as home bakers. And we don't have a temperature controlled environment. At least I don't in my home. And it's certainly not sitting around 78 degrees in my home all the time. Yes, or crepes, right, April? The other thing about a baker is they're baking every day. So every single day they're taking like a half a cup, or maybe more if they're making more loaves, out of their starter, baking with it, and then refeeding it. So if you're thinking like a baker, your starter gets used up every day, and it's kind of in a warmer environment than room temperature every day. Okay. And those are the two things that make your starter get virile and vigorous enough to rise overnight. So this is how you do it. So I know what my jars weigh without any lid on it, and I actually have that in the number of grams on the bottom of my jar. Yeah. So I'm going to do this by weight, but I'm going to also tell you how to do this by volume. So I have scale here, and I know that my jar weighs 285 grams. Don't you? Yes. And so what I want in my jar to get it virile is, oh, good. Yes, King Arthur Flour website has specific recipes for what to do with your sourdough discard. But there's like a lot of recipes in my book too. You can just make something like tortillas. I made those the other night. They were great. Okay, so this is a fake mason that I'm just using for demonstration. So what you want to do to get it to build up to be more virile is to make a concoction of 1 part starter, 1 part water, 1 part flour, and stir that up. And then put your loose lid, keep it warm, and it should double. Now, the 1 part, 1 part, 1 part, some people say 25 grams of each, some say 50, some say 75. I tend to use 50, especially if I'm only going to be making like 1 loaf or something. I might do 75 grams of each if I was building up a starter enough to make 2 loaves. So since I know that Mason's jar weighs 285 grams, and I know that I want 50 grams of starter in there, the weight should say 360 on here, because that's the math, right? 55, okay. Anyway, we're good. So I've got the jar, I've got the right amount of starter in there, 360, 285. Okay, and then I'm gonna zero it out. I did the math crazy, didn't I? It's okay. I feel confident about the everything else I'm doing, but I don't know if I added right just then. It's 55. Hang on. 285. Oh, I get it. It's 285 plus 50 grams is 340. I'm good. Yay. That still doesn't add right, does it? Oh, it's okay. Okay, so I'm going to zero it out, and I'm going to put 50 grams of flour in there and 50 grams of water. So I'm going to zero it out and add my flour, 50 grams. And then I'm going to zero it out again and add 50 grams of water. And I have to do this slowly so it can catch up. There we go. Now, if you want to do this by volume, which is perfectly okay, it's about 1/4 a cup of starter and about 1/3 a cup of water and 1/3 a cup of flour. Okay. Then I'm going to stir this up. And I used rye flour, all rye flour in this. So remember what I said at the beginning, that's going to be super sticky. Dottie right now is all white flour, and I'll show you in a minute that she is less viscous, even though I used the same amounts. So I'm going to show you this. This is really sticky stuff. Really sticky stuff. Okay. And then what I want to do is mark, like I did on the other one, where the top layer of it is, just because that makes it all the more fun. And then cover loosely with just this lid, or with this guy, or with the cheesecloth, and it should double in 8 to 12 hours. And the breads that I've been getting since I've been doubling my starter are bigger in rise and easier to rise and stuff like that. Okay, let me show you Dottie too, because she's all white flour for now, and you can see, I think, that she is thinner, even though it was the same amount of flour, water, and starter. And that, again, is because of the fiber in those whole grain flours. Okay, no, this is not the sponge. This is kind of like a, it's sort of like a preview sponge. So if you can get your starter to do this, then you know you can get your sponge to do this. And the sponge is just the same, is the flour and water in the recipe plus the starter. That's the sponge, which is also called leaven, if you're from France, pouliche, decim. There's all kinds of names for it. Some people call it a pre-ferment, which is odd to me because this is fermented and you're going to ferment your sponge. And so there was just too many ferment words for me, and that's why I just went back to the old Laurel's kitchen of the beginning of your bread as a sponge. Yeah, it's not a third starter. It's a fourth a cup of starter and a third a cup of flour and a third a cup of water. And that's because those three elements weigh out differently. What other questions do I have?
From earlier, Krista wanted to know, she has bubbles in her starter, but it's not growing fast enough. So what does she do? Does she, keep it, or just not growing fast enough?
This is Kristen?
Krista.
So, Krista, can you tell me what growing fast enough means? Does that mean it's not doubling in size? Because I'll tell you, when I first started working on getting my starters to double night, it didn't happen the first night or the second night. It happened the third night. And that's why I am saying that you have to think like a baker. So you have to, if you want this to go on, doubling and doubling and doubling, so that you can bake every day, let's say, or even every other day, you're going to have to prime it every day. And to get it to be like that, you have to prime it for several days until it starts doubling. And once mine started doubling, yes, I could store it in the refrigerator for a few days and then bring it out, get it warm, and start priming it again. But it takes a few days.
Krista says it's not doubling.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's patience, lots and lots of patience. I will say that the first one of mine to get going in the doubling realm was the rye starter, the one where I was using only rye flour, and I have no answer for why that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to know if it's necessary to add yeast making a sourdough starter.
Please do not add yeast to the starter.
With a sourdough starter.
Yeah. So a lot of my recipes, I use the tiniest amount of yeast in there, like a quarter teaspoon or a half a teaspoon when I'm making the dough for the bread. And I don't have to do that, especially if my starter is this virile. But I did that because I wanted people to have success with whole grains. And the truth is, a lot of sourdough bakers use only white flour, or mostly or over 50% white flour, and that's much easier to get a nice rise out of. But whole grains are naturally heavy. The fiber in them absorbs the water slowly, and that makes for more problems with getting a nice rise, and that's why I use that itty bitty yeast in there. What it does really is signal to the yeast that's in the starter, hey, we're here, let's have a party.
Yami also wants to know if you need to put it in the refrigerator if you're going to use it after a few days.
Whether or not to refrigerate your starter is really all about how often you're going to bake. So these days I have been baking twice a week. I've been baking a loaf for the house and a loaf for somebody else. Sometimes 2 loaves for somebody else's. And so I've been keeping mine out at room temperature and doing the virility thing every night. If you're just a once a week or a once every 10-day baker, then you can definitely store your starter in the refrigerator. I like these Fido jars because they allow CO2 to escape a little bit, so it's not gonna, But be sure and take it out at least 2 days, preferably maybe even 3 days prior to baking, so it can really come back to life. Because when it's in the refrigerator, it's dormant. The microorganisms are eating, but at a very slow rate, and they're eliminating, but they're very lethargic. They're too cold. They don't like it. So you want to get it really warmed up and virile before you bake. What else?
That's all I have right now. James wants a wrap up at the end. So
wants me to recap.
He must have come late.
That's okay, James. That's cool. A couple other things I wanted to say. Oh, also, some people, and I think I have this in my book, will say you want your starter, if it's ready, it can do the float test. And what that means is you have a container of water, and you take just a little bit of starter and just lay it out on the surface, and it will float. And I will say this, that in the realm of starterdom, some of my starters float and some of them don't. So I like the doubling as more of an indicator that they're virile and ready to go, because I can get any of my starters to do that at this point. And it took several tries. Patience is everything around sourdough. If you want to develop some patience, and particularly if you want to not be on screens all day, bake some bread. It's really cool. So one other thing I wanted to say was starters are dynamic. That means they're a living thing. So the microorganisms, or the bacteria, they eat flour, and in their metabolic work, they discard sugars and the hooch. And the yeast eat the sugar discard, and they're very happy. And the yeast live and die, and the bacteria, microorganisms, eat the dead yeast as protein. It's a crazy system of symbiotic living. And they're very sensitive, these starters, to temperature and what flour you choose and how often they're fed. So the main thing I'm always going to ask people about when they tell me something is not going right with their starter is, what temperature is it at and how often have you fed it? And that is crucial. So if it's too cold, it's going to be kind of lethargic and not do anything. If it's too hot, that's where you can get into the trouble of it attracting the wrong kind of bacteria. So if you start getting your starter up over 85 degrees or something in the summer, it can go putrid. I've saved one, but it can do that. Yeah.
Barbara wants to know what size of jar to use and maybe what type I'm throwing in that part.
Yeah, so I like just regular old mason jars like that. That's why this one's name is Mason right now, so I could remember to tell you that. They work fine. And you really, for the recipes in my book anyway, I use a half a cup of starter. Again, there's these crazy things on the internet. Some bakers use 2 tablespoons of starter. Some bakers use a cup of starter. So I chose something in the middle that would work for beginning bakers, a half a cup. So you don't need more than a cup in there if you're getting ready to bake.
And that works for the lines.
That's perfectly what I have, yeah. These are great for if you're a occasional baker and it's going in and out of the refrigerator, these Fido jars. Because they seal it, but they allow gas to escape. So they're not so tight that it's going to die in there. Yeah. What else?
Mary Ellen wants to know if she can watch the episode later.
This is my first time doing a Facebook Live episode, but my understanding is that it gets saved in my videos on Cookus Interruptus Facebook, so you should be able to watch it later. What else?
Alexandra's question about the discard.
Oh, so no, so here's my Viral doubled starter, and I would bake with this. You know, I'm going to use half of it, which is going to take it down almost to where it needs to do that 50 gram, 50 gram, 50 gram. There, I might need to take a little more off, but not much off. If I'm not going to bake, then I'm going to have to discard it or throw it away or make something with it, like those savory pancakes, or I guess there's something on the King Arthur Flour website about what to do with your discard, or sweet pancakes. Those are fun too. Yeah.
Working with teff, James.
Oh, teff is a cool idea. I mean, I don't really feed I've never fed a starter teff. Have you fed your starter teff, James? Because I'd love to know how that comes out. I should try that. I should make an all teff starter. That would be exciting. So interesting too that the one that's all rye is so thick, even though it was, you know, 1 to 1 to 1, and Dottie's much thinner, and Fizz, who's around here somewhere. Yeah, I don't know where she is. No, there. Yeah, and Fizz is a whole wheat, and her viscosity is literally in between those two. And then my good guess, is that that's all about fiber. Another thing I want to say is that I have this is a 1 pint jar, and this is about 1 pint as well. Although it's going to come, if you buy one, it's going to be in milliliters.
You tried the teff.
Oh, you tried the teff?
It didn't work.
Oh, and it didn't work. Well, there you go. Wow, okay. Should I store in crusty, slightly black stuff that forms in my refrigerator starter? Oh, stir it in. I would not stir that crusty stuff in. No, it just bogs it down. I would just scrape it off and discard that and not make anything out of it. Just discard it. Yeah. Oh, Kent, thank you. Yes, you can watch this later. That's so nice. Something else that I want to say, and then I'll do the recap. That was it James that asked me to do that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Something else I wanted to say is that I have driven myself almost bonkers over the last 10 years reading about sourdough and watching videos about sourdough, and, you know, reading more articles about sourdough. And the one thing that I have really learned well is that every baker out there thinks that their way is the best way. And every baker out there has a different way. So it can be super confusing. I've had days where I'm just like, what? Oh my gosh. Just overwhelmed with the number of different ways there are to do things. So and here, this is my book.
Alexandra, yeah.
So I would like to tell you that you will find your own method. You'll find your own ways of storing things so they stay warm, or rising your bread. You'll find how much you need to feed it, how to make your starter happy. You're going to find your own way. And my way is one way, and it works for me, and it's worked for some other people too. But I would say, don't do what I did and watch a million bakers tell you how they make their sourdough, because you'll get really confused. The other thing,
April's asked about the grape a couple of times.
Oh, the grape. What
it's
about
right there. I think she asked before.
Okay. Oh no, if your starter's going well, you don't need any grapes in there. No, and you don't need to replace any grapes. It's just there at the very, very beginning to attract some wild yeast into your starter. Once it's bubbling, it's good to go. Yeah. I wanted to say something about my book too, and I still have time to recap. Good. And that is that this has 12 bread recipes in it, but a lot of them are flatbreads, like pancakes and naan and focaccia and things like that, where this doubling, where this virality needed to rise a big loaf isn't as necessary. And so this is really a book for beginners, and I suggest starting out with pancakes or starting out with, I think my daughter started out with focaccia and had a lot of luck, and build up slowly your confidence by doing those flatbreads. And I recently watched a video about about sourdough, and this was a baker, and she said, oh my gosh, if you get a good boule, here, can I show that boule? If you get a good boule like this in your first year, you're doing well. And my jaw dropped. This was a baker that said that. And I've always said, you got to commit to at least making 10 loaves like that before you give up and go, this isn't working. Does temperature fluctuation harm a resting starter? Once your starter is grown up, okay, so it can almost sort of like take care of itself. The temperature fluctuation, being too cool is going to be okay. It's just going to be kind of lazy and not ready for baking. And being too hot, meaning over 85 degrees, is a little dangerous. Where it's the happiest, again, think like a baker. Where it's the happiest is in an environment that's around 78 degrees. I know, who lives in that? But I promise there's places in your home where you can find 78 degrees. When I first started, I used to keep my starter in the linen closet, all those blankets, and there's no windows. It's just kind of in the middle of the house, and it was warmer in there. And then for a while, I used to rise my dough in a small bathroom with a space heater. And now I use a cooler with a light in it.
Hot water heaters would be good too.
Yeah, on top of a hot water heater. Just be careful and check the temperature if you can. Just feel it. Use your senses more than reading things. Oh, thank you, Alexandra. I'm glad you liked the focaccia. Yeah. Any other questions that I've missed?
Not that I have, or I might have missed them myself.
No. Okay, so I'm going to do a recap then for James and for anybody that came in late. So I started out this thing with this whole process today with, with making your own starter. And there's a good reason to do that, and that's to develop your education level about your starter and a relationship, and be sure and name it. And it was about a half a cup of flour and enough water to get it into pancake batter or milkshake batter viscosity. And I put a grape in there just as an extra bonus to attract wild yeast. Then some kind of flavoring. That's your starter. Then you're going to feed it over the course of somewhere between probably 4, 7, 14 days until it starts coming to life. And by that I mean every time you stir it, you see bubbles going on. Oh, you're so welcome, Robert. Thank you for coming, Krista. And then I went over all of the things that can happen that make you think you should throw it away. So you can rewatch that to hear those. Most of the time, your starter's okay and you can bring it back to life. And then I went over how to make your starter super virile, double in size overnight, getting it ready for baking. That's what I did. What else? Any other questions?
None that I have. Repeat if I missed it.
Yeah, repeat any questions. I went like fast. I did this fast. I wanted to get everything in. And, you know, I'm not a professional baker at all. So I came at this from the standpoint of wanting to encourage people that are living in a normal home without a wood burning oven in their backyard or whatever, that they could make some really good bread. And I'm devoted and have been my entire career to using whole grains. And most of us, every single one of us, needs more fiber in our diet. Most gut experts say 35 grams of fiber a day, and most of us are eating 15. And so.
Oh, the spelling of phyto jars.
Oh, Fido, Fido. Yeah. Yeah. And some other video, some other time, I would love to go over all of the benefits of sourdough, because if you're using whole grains, that's key. There's a tremendous number of incredible benefits to eating this fermented bread. I don't have any more classes scheduled online right this second, but stay tuned to Facebook, Cookus Interruptus, and I will post them there. I think there's something maybe coming up with the Seattle Public Library, and I'll let you know about that. I didn't wash the grape. When do you discard the grape? When it's bubbling and happy in there. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I know it's hard to find flour now, but I've found some dealers. Yeah. And just keep checking out those mills. You'll find it. Oh, thank you. Oh, look, my sister was here and my daughter. I mean, that is some family support. I love that. Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for coming, Bake Bread. You can send me questions, but don't send me photographs of your stuff. I can't taste it or smell. Love. Yeah. Save it.